Hey everyone, Ken McCall, the Jazz Vinyl Lover, back again on a chilly January, February, March, April 1st day in New York City. And I wanted to talk about some records that are just unusual, uncommon records on unusual, uncommon record labels. And I'm starting out with a record that is not on a rare label, Folkways, but this is a really unusual 10-inch record by the great drummer Baby Dodds, one of the earliest jazz drummers. He played with Armstrong and some other folks, and if you hear him, he is so funky. But this record in particular, Baby Dodds Talking and Drum Solos from 1951, is just a real blast. I don't think this thing has been reissued even. It's just him talking through some songs and playing some solos, talking about the rudiments. Some of the titles are Shimmy Beat and Press Roll Demonstration, Nerve Beats, which is weird. There used to be a drum and bass band in New York City called Nerve. It was Jojo Mayer's group, I believe, with Tim LaFave, the bass player, who now plays with everybody and his mother. He was in the Tedeschi Trucks band for a long time. Anyway, that's kind of weird. Nerve Beats, Careless Love Blues, Spooky Drums 1 and 2, Rudiments with Drumstick. It's sort of like, you know, ketchup with mayonnaise. But anyway, it's a really unusual record. If you ever see it, it's one to grab on Folkways, which of course is the great label, and 117 West 46th Street, Footnotes to Jazz, Baby Dodds Talking and Drum Solos. I could probably play this for you, and I bet that YouTube wouldn't even kill it. A record from the early 90s with two of the great provocateurs of the instruments, the great Curtis Lundy and the great Robert Watson. Now this is on an unusual label. The whole theme of our thing here. I don't know what the label is. Century Park. New Note Records. Interesting, right? This was just a prime example with the late Mulgrew Miller and Kenny Washington on drums. Just playing, you know, Bobby Watson did a bunch of really great tunes. I don't know where he is now. Maybe he moved to Europe, but he was a great player, is a great player. Put out a bunch of, a spate of great records. This is 1983, actually. Back when I was a drummer, I collected anything with Kenny Washington, who's one of the great exemplars of jazz drumming. Now in the fusion mode, this is a really bizarre record on Golden Boy Records. Jacob Magnuson, who was a keyboard player, and I bought this purely because it's an early example of Vinnie Colaiuta on drums. This is from, there's no date on this, but you can probably look at his hair to give you some idea of when this is, in the really horrible stuff. But this is really just cranking, I think it's early 90s, late 80s fusion with a great lineup, mostly Swedish musicians, I believe. Gunnar Samar Helgason, Julius Agnason, Jonas R. Jonasson, and Vinny just taking names and kicking ass. And a lot of it is that prime LA fusion band of that era with Steve Anderson, Jeff Berlin, Michael Landau, Steve Taglioni, Mike Fisher, and Steve Foreman on percussion. So just an odd, actually this is on the Optimism label, which probably, you know, this veered into smooth jazz in the early 90s, but this is not a smooth jazz record. And it's funny that it has a saxophone on the cover when the guy didn't play saxophone. Along that same lines, but much more serious, the great Jody Orio, who was a guitarist who worked out of LA, and I understand he taught at the Guitar Institute, and he's just like a monster. This is a trio with Jeff Berlin and Vinnie Colaiuta. This was a hard record to find back then. I'm sure it's just as hard now. 21st Century Impressions. If you're a drummer, you know, you seek out, as I did back in the day, all these records with Vinnie Colaiuta. Now they're all over YouTube. But, you know, Vinnie's, I still think, even with all the modern drummers, he's probably the last great drumming innovator so far. You know, he began with Zappa and played with Joni Mitchell and Gino Vanelli and did all these amazing records. And this one's a little bit freer. I don't have the exact year on this, but I'm thinking it's around 87. And it's weird because they do, you know, fusion stuff, Space Shuttle Shuffle, as well as the Days of Wine and Roses and Ave Maria. It's a bizarre record, but everybody is really throwing down. Then on an entirely different tip, early 60s, Charles Earland, Soul Crib. And this is on the, what label is this? CMG, Choice Records, Box 5221, Newark. You know, it was Charles Earland before he became, the Charlie Earland Trio, with Jimmy Ponder, Walter Perkins, and George Coleman. This is a pretty rockin' record. I haven't listened to it in a while, but it's late 50s, early 60s. Back in the days when there were, particularly in the Northeast, there were blues and jazz bars everywhere, and cats were working all the time. You had Hammond B3 organs and pianos and bars all over the place. Before TV was so incredibly ensconced in everybody's brain, people went out and learned how to drink. But there you see at the back. I've only seen this record twice. I bought it one of those times I bought it. Also another Charles Earland record, Boss Organ, also on Choice. Choice prided themselves as the Sound of America label, and they're into pink, right? Boss Organ, the Charlie Earland Trio. And I'll show you the back here. With another great band, you know, Charles Earland, Jimmy Ponder, Bobby Durham. Is he cool or what? That is hip. Soul, 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 soul. And then moving back up to the late 80s again, I bought this for Jerry Hemingway, the great drummer, along with the trombonist Ray Anderson and the bassist Mark Elias, on the very bizarre label, Oracle. Oh, Hopsy. I assume this is named after some Native American thing. The interesting thing about these records, the Gary Hemingway records, is that they're really, really well recorded. I don't know why or what the deal is. Mastered by Dave Crawford at Master Disc, recorded at the Educational for the Center for the Arts in New Haven, 1978. Free, artistic, cultural. It's not really free jazz. It's very because it's not blowing the walls down. It's, what's the word for it? I'm not sure, but it's very artistic, very pointillistic, very artful, but it is not aggressive and throwing down. Some of it is, but it's sort of contained. They're really letting the instruments resonate on their own power. It's almost like hitting a cymbal and letting it ring, and just getting absorbed in that, which is a beautiful thing. Then Odeon, Jazz in Europe. The Odeon label is pretty common, actually. German pressings, really well done German pressings, a beautiful label. And this is from probably the early 60s. I bought it for the lineup. Oh, it's a live concert, 1962, the Jazz Workshop, with just a who's who of whoever is whoever. Arne Dommerus, Herb Geller, Hans Kohler, Ronnie Ross, Frederick Goulda. I mean, right there, you've got an incredible rhythm section in the lineup. So, I mean, I saw this once, I bought it. Cool record. Jazz in Europe. Moving forward, a label that's hard to find now, but wasn't back in the day. Sound Aspects, Butch Morris record. You know, the great Butch Morris, the whole conduction, way of conducting orchestra or a big band. Very forward-thinking music, very free in places, not for everyone. Whenever I see the name Louis Maholo, I buy the record. A great, I believe, a South African drummer. Probably got that wrong. British drummer? African? I don't know. But on Intact, the great free jazz label. You either like this stuff or you don't. I can't. The jazz vinyl lovers, we have arguments about this. Heated discussion sometimes about what constitutes jazz, free jazz and not jazz. I think it is. It's expressive. And this is an unusual record. Great little insert. There she is. That's a cool one. And then a Golden Blast from the 70s, which was every audiophile had back in the 70s, late 70s. The Sheffield Drum Lab record. Just drums. One side, Jim Keltner, the great studio drummer who began with Gabriel Szabo and played with everybody in the world and still does. Traveling Wilburys, George Harrison, Tom Petty. And Ron Tutt, Elvis's drummer. Never listened to the Ron Tutt side, not very exciting. But this is a beautiful recording, as are many Sheffield Labs records. You know, they were made for audiophiles, often direct to disc. I have an amazing one. Who did I just interview the other day? we're talking about the record James Newton Howard and Friends, another Sheffield Labs disc, which is essentially James Newton Howard before he became a well-known soundtrack composer, playing with the members of Toto, with Jeff Becerra on drums and David Paik on keyboards. If you see that record, it's an incredible sounding record. And if your system's not up to the task, it won't be able to play it because the low end is so low, it'll just blow out your speakers. But I forgot who I was talking that with. But just another unusual, Sheffield Labs. Zooming back to the year 2015 just about, this came out, Frank Lowe, the free jazz saxophonist, Out Loud. This is about a $100 record, limited edition. I don't know what the story of this is, but when I used to work at Jazz Record Center full-time in the early 90s, Frank would come in. He was good friends with the owner, Fred Cohen, and Frank would sell his soul, I think, to get drug money, or just money to survive. But an amazing, powerful saxophonist. And this was just on, I'm not even sure what label this is, but it's a numbered disc thing. Oh, Triple Point Records, 2014, with Joseph Bowie, William Parker, and Steve Reed. That's an incredible lineup. William Parker, one of the great bass players. Steve Reed, I'm not that fond of, but a lot of people like him a lot. And Frank was just a spirit. He was a really gentle spirit to play such ferocious music. And then winding down, not that hard to find, but just a great label, America Art Ensemble of Chicago, Certain Blacks. I love Art Ensemble. Who doesn't love them? Just an American treasure that should be playing at the White House. But that's a whole nother story. Anyway, thanks for checking in. I thought it might be kind of, somewhat interesting to see some more odd jazz labels. There's so many of them out there. And I hope you have a great day and a wonderful spring. Bye-bye.